In this section of the tutorial, we are going to talk about arrays and how they help us in building super cool web application in JavaScript. So what are arrays? Arrays are like variables, but this time they are bigger variables or they're super variables that allows us to save multiple values or multiple objects or elements in one name. So say for instance, I have in a table where there is a list of users containing user's first name. So instead of me writing each variable for each user's first name, I could create an array to hold all users' first name, and I could loop through that array and I would get my value on the fly, hassle-free, without having to define each variable for each first name. So in this case, I'm going to show us the two basic ways of creating an array. The first way is this. We hold the array in a variable by using the variable keyword, say var, first name, and we put it in square brackets, while each value or each element or object in the array would go either as a string, an integer, or a Boolean value. And we've covered this in our previous tutorial. If you don't know what string, integer, or Boolean values mean, please go back to our previous tutorial on variables and data types. So in this case, I'm going to have first name said Emmanuel, separated by comma. Second case goes oziri. Third case goes Dixon. Fourth case goes Tony. Then that one, say Giovanni. Okay. So we've just successfully created our first array. How do we see this? All we have to do is to console.log the name of the variable. So if I reload this, I would have array and we have Emmanuel, Oziri, Dixon, Tony, Giovanni. Okay, so another case of creating an array is we also define it in a variable called first name 2, maybe this time around first name 2, and we'd use the new array keyword in a bracket, and this time I will just copy all the values in the first array we defined in the new array. So we'll copy all of this to here, and I would also console.log this one. So first name 2. I will just uncomment this out so we could see clearly, and if I reload this, I still have an array. Okay, so either ways you like to create an array, it's all good for you. However, there are pros and cons of using these two methods in creating an array. Firstly, this method is being treated as the object way of creating an array, although arrays are object, but in cases whereby we use prebuilt name classes or prebuilt name objects created already in JavaScript, we would have a value in the array treated as object, and I'll show us that in a minute. Now, why are we having this as an issue? Getting data off an array is quite simple than getting data off an object, and I will show us that in a minute. So for instance, say I'd use the keyword name instead of first name to create or hold the variable of my array index method, and if I check this back on my browser, I would have Emmanuel, Oziri, Dixon, Tony, Giovanni. Now these elements are treated as an object, okay? They are not treated like this one, and you will see the color looks quite different. Say for instance, I want to get a value out of an array. How I would get a value out of an array is by calling the name of the array and also adding the index number in square brackets. So the index number starts from 0. So that means the ID position of Emmanuel here is 0, of Oziri here is 1, of Dixon here is 2, of Tony here is 3, of Giovanni here is 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And the length of this array is what? 5. So again, the index number starts from 0. So for me to get Emmanuel, I'm just going to enter in square bracket 0. So I'm expecting to get the whole of Emmanuel from this array or from this object array. But if I view this, I'm having just E. Now I'll repeat the same case for this other one. So all I did was just to say for first name, I'm just going to copy this guy and just like so. So I'll try to reload this and I'm having Emmanuel. Now this case are the same, but I'm having Emmanuel. Probably, let me change the name of this to name so we're even. And this also to name. So if I reload this, I would see that I'm having also the same issue. So this is a very popular problem using arrays and creating objects or elements with arrays. But I would advise us vividly to use descriptive variables. This is one way we would avoid having these issues. Okay, that is that for an array. Now this issue is not probably restricted to only this type of array. It is also restricted to this type of array. So in this case, I changed the name from first name to in this case and first name to in this case and change it to just name. So if I save this and reload this on my browser, I'll be having EE, which means that these names are already prebuilt names or prebuilt object names or class names in JavaScript. So we need to create ours to avoid this issue. And how do we create ours? By using descriptive variable names. So first name, so maybe I use the first name. And if I use just the first name variable key, I think this problem will be better solved. So if I reload this on my browser, I have Emmanuel. Like I said earlier, removing data from objects and data from array are two different things entirely. For instance, removing data or removing the first name from the first name variable or the first name array variable was outputs just Emmanuel, while the other one outputs just E. So to solve that issue, I think we're better equipped now. So what about if we want to get some values out of the array? Like we want to sort an array to make it give us a value in an accordance form of the alphabetical letters, or we want to get the length of an array. So to do that, we're just going to say first name dot length, and this would output the length of this array. Now it's going to output the length of the array in strings, okay? So if I reload this, I have 5. So I have 5 strings right here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So say I add another value, but this time an integer, and if we reload this, we have 6. Okay? Now for this one, for this case, I would like to bring out the length of this one, or to attribute the length of this one. And if I reload this, I'm going to see 34. Now these are the same array values but different output, okay, because this is kind of like an object way. So say for instance we want to also sort this array, we'd use the keyword .sort, and if we reload this, we're going to see say for instance we want to sort this arrays to output or print its value in alphabetical form. We would use the .sort function. So I'm going to duplicate this, and right here I'm going to write sort and as a function. So if I reload this on my browser, I have array 52 That is 52 numerical, 52 alphabetical strings inside. Sorry. So if I reload this on my browser, I have 52. So the number comes before the string. So 52, I have Dixon. So, and I have Emmanuel, I have Giovanni, I have Oziri and Tony. So if I'm to say from A, B, C, D, the D comes before the E, and E comes before J, O, and T. So you see, arrays are very important in this regard. So for instance, we have 300 names right here. We could get all of this sorted for us easily, okay? So one other feature of arrays we'll talk about is the ability to mutate data. That means we could actually get any value or any data we want, or change any data or any value we want. So say for instance, say I want to do other things with. So for instance, say I want to perform other specific tasks like adding an element before or after the array list we have here, or for instance, destroying an element or destroying our arrays, or concatenating two arrays together to form a bigger array. There are a lot of JavaScript pre-built methods for us to do that. So we start the first one by using the .push JavaScript array function. So to do that, right here, I'm going to call the name of the variable of the array, just like this. And next, I am going to use the .pushQ method. And in the .push method, I am going to add the new variable or new element I want to add in my array. So this time, I would have a name called Joel. And if we reload this on our browser, we would have 7. That is because we already opted out to view the length of this array. And if I remove the .length property, I would see Joel right here in my array. So the next one would look is the unshift. So I'm just going to duplicate this one, and I'm going to add unshift. So this time I'll write unshift for Susan, and I'll reload this on my browser. So the unshift element or the unshift data method, element method, adds data before our array, while the push pushes data to the last element in an array. Okay. We could also use the slice function to add data in an array or element in an array, but I would not specify on that since the push and the unshift method covers that for us. The last that we want to show us is the concatenate method. So for instance, say I have two arrays, one containing first name and second one containing maybe age. So for sake of illustration, I'll remove this and I'll remove this. So I'm going to name this age. So say we have an array, and for first name, Emmanuel, Oziri, Dixon, Tony, Giovanni all has their age in this array respectively. So I'll definitely leave that as an integer, 20, and I'm just going to put some random values right here. Okay, so this way, I would want to concatenate the first and the second array together. So how do I do this? I'm going to call the name first name dot concat, and I'm going to pass the first variable, and I'm going to pass two variables. The first variable is going to be first name, like so, and the second one is going to be age, which we defined year already. So if I save this on my browser and reload this on my browser, I won't see anything right now because I have not console or show this on my browser. So I could console this straight up, or I could define it in a variable. But let's just console.log this straight up to see what we have. So if I reload this on my browser, I have the concatenation of the first array and the concatenation plus the second one. So right here, I have Susan, Emmanuel, Oziri, Dixon, Tony, Giovanni, Joel, Susan, Emmanuel, all concatenated again to each other. And just right here, we see the other array I added, which is 20, 30, 40, 50, 14, 19. So this way, I have the concatenation of both arrays. There are a lot of use cases in this way, in this example. Okay, so, but for now, we will stick to this, and I hope this would increase our knowledge about arrays. Arrays are super useful and are super helpful. So how do we know if a data type or if an element is an array? There are a lot of ways to know. The first one to use is the item list function. The first one to use is the instance of array function. Each array element all has instance of in the browser's DOM. So for instance, if I call on the name of my array first by console logging this, and I call on the name of my array, which is in this case name, or preferably would use name1, and then I add the text instance of array, close with a semicolon. If I reload this on my browser, I'm going to see true, because in this case it is an array. Now, how does the instance of array work? The instance of array works if the element or if the array has an instance which is seen in the proto of the array just right here called array. So if it has that instance, it is going to be referred to as an array. Maybe I would make this more clearer. So for instance, I'm just going to comment that out and remove this also. So if I console log just that, I'm going to have true. Now this time, let me just console log name1. And if I reload this, click on this, and I click on proto, I'm going to find the instance of okay, so I have constructors, and in the constructor, I can see the name, which is an array. So the name of the constructor of this one is an array. Okay, so and also it has the instance, so the instance of this one, which is having is array, is because this data type or this element is an array. So I don't know how possible to make this more clear, but I believe I made my point. I don't know how possible to make this more clear, but I believe I made my point this way. Okay, so let's just take this back to name and see. So this time we want to leave it so I'm going to delete that also to make this an object name. So if I reload this, I have Emmanuel, Oziri, I have Dixon, Tony, Giovanni, and they're all regarded as object because of the name I'm using. The name is already pre-built in JavaScript, as I explained before, and this time around it's actually making the name seem more like a class already pre-built and more attributing my arrays to be an object. And if you check from this instance of array I used, you would notice that it says false because it doesn't view this object type to be an array. Other ways is to create our own function to check if an element is an array. Now we do this so simple by actually picking classes or constructors or methods from our array. Now I would want to show us something right in this array, and if I come down, I'm going to find index or index of. So if I click on index of, I'm going to see more of the prototype of it, and I would see more information about it. So this way I can use this instance or this method to find if this element is an array. So I want to create a function, a pre-function or already function to check if an element is an array. So I'm going to say isArray as my function name. So function isArray, and I'm going to pass in a parameter x, and I'm going to ask it just to return x dot construct dot to string and dot index of as array. So if it's greater than -1, I want you to actually make this work. So I'm going to call isArray right here, and I'm going to pass name1 to it. So I'd want to console.log this. Okay, so if I reload this on my browser, okay, sorry, I need to add constructor to this. Okay, so if I reload this on my browser, I already have true. Now if this time, if it's not an array, we would have false in this case. So if I'm to change name to name and I change this to name, would notice that this would output name to name, and I will just remove this guy. So if I reload this, I would have false. So this is we creating our own method to determine or to define if an element or an object is actually an array. So in this case, this is an object and this is an array. So to wrap it all, we learned all about array. In fact, almost all there is about arrays. We learned about adding data in arrays, removing data in array. We heard about the push, the unshift, and the concatenate to concatenate two arrays together. We learned about two ways of creating an array, and the first one is this one, to be specific, this one, and the second one is this one, is the var. I will learn that if we use certain keywords to create an array like we used for the variable name, we'll be facing issues of arrays being changed to objects. But in this case where we use the first name, the arrays are different. So more preferably, you should use specific names for your arrays and unique names for your arrays. Okay? So lastly, we created a function to determine if an element or something is really an array. So if you want to know more about the function, you need to visit the previous video of this tutorial about functions to get more idea about function. Okay, so thanks for watching. There's probably all we have for this tutorial on arrays. It was kind of lengthy. I hope you enjoyed it, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Thank you.